General Hospital spoilers keep circling around this dark possibility that Britt might end up watching her own benefactor die, and honestly, that idea won't leave my head. It feels cruel in a very specific way. Not just death for shock value, but death placed right in front of her eyes, forcing her to understand exactly what her choices have cost someone else. And when people say benefactor, I cannot help thinking about Lucas. Lucas, who has been slowly stepping into dangerous territory almost without realizing how deep the ground is cracking beneath him. Britt working in that secret lab inside the castle already sounds like something out of a fever dream. A castle, a hidden laboratory, forced compliance. It is dramatic, yes, but it is also suffocating. Cullum has positioned her there not as a respected doctor, but as a tool. That is the part that bothers me the most. Britt is brilliant, she is capable, yet in that space she is reduced to someone who follows orders because she has no real exit. I keep thinking about how isolating that must feel. No allies in sight, just walls, locked doors, and the constant awareness that someone is always watching. Cullum does not even need to raise his voice. His leverage is enough. He threatens Britt's family, and that alone is a chain around her wrists. Or maybe it is even simpler than that. Maybe the thing that terrifies Britt most is her own mortality. She knows she is sick. She knows her life depends on medication that Cullum controls. That is not a vague threat. It is immediate. It is biological. He can cut off her treatment at any moment. That is basically a quiet execution stretched over days or weeks instead of a single violent act. And this is where it becomes unbearable to think about. Cullum is the one supplying her treatment, the one thing keeping her stable, the one thing allowing her to function, to breathe without that constant shadow of decline. If she disobeys him, he withholds the drug. It is not just manipulation, it is calculated cruelty. He has engineered a situation where Britt cannot even pretend she has options. You want to rebel? Fine, then you die. It is that simple. There are too many reasons for her to comply. Too many traps layered over each other. Some might wonder why Britt or her mother, Liesl, cannot simply recreate the medication. Liesl is a genius in her own right. Britt is more than capable in the lab, but I do not think the problem is intelligence. The problem is surveillance. Cullum likely anticipated that possibility. He probably forbids Britt from conducting any private experiments. No secret batches, no independent trials. I would not be surprised if he stationed men outside her lab, maybe even inside it, under the guise of security, watching her every move, checking her notes, counting every vial. It is the kind of details someone like him would obsess over. So even if Britt has the formula memorized, even if she understands the molecular structure down to the last compound, she cannot act. Knowledge without freedom is useless. That is the tragedy. She might know exactly how to save herself and still be unable to do it. But Lucas is different. Lucas is not confined within those castle walls. Lucas has access, mobility, and maybe just enough distance from Cullum's immediate control to attempt something risky. If anyone could synthesize the treatment without raising suspicion at first, it might be him, and I find that both hopeful and terrifying at the same time. The catch, of course, is that Lucas would need the formula and a sample of the medication. He cannot reverse engineer something from thin air. Britt would have to take the risk of siphoning off a small amount of her treatment, maybe leaving just enough in a syringe. Maybe pretending she used the full dose while secretly preserving a fraction for analysis. That image sticks with me. Britt standing there, heart pounding, calculating milliliters, knowing that if she misjudges the amount, she could compromise her own health. And yet she does it anyway because it is the only sliver of autonomy she has left. Then she would have to contact Lucas in secret. Not openly, not in a way that could be traced. A quiet message, a coded request, something that says help me without saying it directly. I can imagine Lucas realizing the severity immediately. He cares about her. He would not hesitate. That is the kind of person he is, sometimes to his own detriment. And this is where the spoiler about Britt witnessing her benefactor's death becomes chilling. Because if Lucas throws himself into developing a cure for her, he paints a target on his back. Cullum is not stupid. He may not notice at first, but eventually patterns shift, supplies get diverted, data gets accessed, someone whispers something. It only takes one mistake. One overlooked security feed. One loyal henchman asking the wrong question. If Cullum discovers that Lucas is interfering, I do not see him responding mildly. He would not issue a warning. He would act decisively. Abduction seems entirely possible. Lucas could disappear overnight. Taken to some undisclosed location, locked away, interrogated, threatened, and Britt would know, maybe not immediately, but eventually she would realize he vanished because of her. The cruelty escalates when you factor in Marco. Lucas and Marco share a close bond. Cullum might not care about that. In fact, he might exploit it. If hurting Marco ensures Lucas's silence or compliance, I believe Cullum would consider it. That is the kind of ruthless logic he operates under. Remove obstacles, clean the path, no sentiment, no hesitation. I keep coming back to the idea of Britt being forced to watch. Not physically restrained maybe, but emotionally trapped. Imagine her discovering that Lucas tried to save her, that he risked everything to create a version of the drug outside Cullum's control. And then imagine Cullum staging some brutal consequence. Maybe Lucas does not survive the ordeal. Maybe he is executed as an example. Or maybe he dies during an escape attempt that Britt indirectly triggered. Either way, she would carry that weight. There is something almost Shakespearean about it, though I hate using that word because it sounds too polished. This is messier. This is uglier. A woman coerced into complicity. A man trying to help and paying the ultimate price. Power, crushing loyalty. And all of it wrapped around a vial of medication that determines who lives and who does not. Part of me wonders if Britt would break at that point. If witnessing Lucas's death would shatter whatever fragile compliance she has maintained. Or maybe it would do the opposite. Maybe it would push her deeper into obedience, convinced that resistance only brings more bloodshed. I cannot decide which outcome is worse. What makes this storyline compelling, at least to me, is not just the danger, it is the moral trap. Britt is not choosing evil for the sake of it. She is surviving. She is cornered. Every action she takes is filtered through fear. Fear of dying, fear of losing her family, fear of triggering retaliation. And yet survival sometimes demands complicity. That is the uncomfortable truth. Lucas stepping into that space changes the equation. He represents possibility, hope even. But hope in a controlled environment is dangerous. It threatens the person holding the leash. Cullum will not tolerate that threat for long. If this spoiler plays out the way it hints, it will not just be about a death. It will be about the cost of control, about how far someone like Cullum is willing to go to maintain dominance, and about whether Britt can live with herself if the person who tried to save her becomes a casualty of her silence. I do not think this is a simple rescue story. I think it is going to hurt, and I think that is exactly why it feels so real. And if Lucas really does get taken, I do not think it will be loud at first. No dramatic explosion, no public scene, just silence. The kind of silence that makes your stomach drop because you know something is wrong but no one is saying it out loud. He stops answering calls, he misses a shift. Marco starts pacing, pretending not to panic, but he is panicking. Everyone can see it. I keep imagining Britt realizing before anyone else, not because she is psychic, but because guilt has a way of sharpening instinct. She would feel it in her chest. That heavy, cold weight. The moment she hears that Lucas is missing, her mind would connect the dots instantly. Cullum found out. Of course he did. Cullum always finds out. And here's the thing that makes me uneasy. Britt might not be allowed to react. She is still inside that castle lab. Still under surveillance. Cameras maybe. Guards definitely. She cannot scream. She cannot break down. She has to stand there and continue working hand steady, measuring compounds while somewhere Lucas is being interrogated or worse. That is psychological torture. And Cullum knows it. I do not see Cullum as someone who just kills impulsively. He is strategic. If he takes Lucas, it is not only to eliminate a threat, it is to send a message to Britt. To anyone who might think about helping her. You try to outsmart me, this is what happens. Simple, brutal, effective. There is also the possibility that Lucas does make progress before he is caught. Maybe he manages to isolate something in the sample Britt gave him. Maybe he is close, really close, to replicating the medication. That would make Cullum even more dangerous. Because then it is not just about disobedience. It is about losing control over Britt entirely. If she no longer depends on Cullum for treatment, his leverage disappears. And men like him do not tolerate losing leverage. Marco could become collateral damage. I hate that idea, but it fits the pattern. If Cullum thinks Marco knows anything or might try to retaliate, he could neutralize him too. Not necessarily kill him, but detain him, threaten him, use him as bait. I can picture a scenario where Britt is forced to watch a live feed, Lucas restrained, Marco beaten, Cullum standing there calmly explaining that this is the cost of betrayal. It sounds extreme, but this storyline has been building towards something extreme. And what would Britt do in that moment? That is the question that keeps circling in my head. Would she beg? Would she promise absolute obedience forever? Would she offer herself completely? No more secret messages, no more hidden samples, just compliance? Or would something inside her snap because there is only so much a person can take before fear turns into something else? Anger, desperation, a kind of reckless courage. I am not convinced Britt is as powerless as Cullum believes. Yes, he controls her medication. Yes, he monitors her. But he also underestimates emotion. Lucas risking his life for her could change her calculations. Before, she was surviving. After that, she might start fighting, even if it costs her everything. There is also Liesel. We cannot forget Liesel. If she senses that Britt is in deeper danger, she will not sit quietly. Liesel is not someone who accepts threats to her daughter. If Lucas disappears, if Marco is targeted, Liesel might start digging. And if she discovers Cullum's operation, that could ignite a completely different war. I almost think Cullum should fear Liesel more than anyone else, but he probably thinks he has covered every angle. Back to Lucas though, because the spoiler specifically hints that Britt might witness her benefactor's death. That word witness is important. It suggests proximity, not hearing about it later, not reading a report, seeing it. Maybe Cullum forces her to be present. Maybe he wants her to understand that hope is dangerous, that anyone who tries to help her will pay. If Lucas dies in front of her, I do not think Britt will ever be the same. Not in a dramatic soap way where she vows revenge immediately. I think it would be quieter, colder. She would internalize it. She would replay the moment over and over. The look on his face, the realization that he tried to save her and failed, that kind of trauma does not just disappear. And I wonder if Cullum might miscalculate here. Killing Lucas could secure short-term control, but it could also create long-term rebellion. Britt might comply for a while, yes. Out of shock. Out of grief. But grief can ferment into something dangerous, especially when mixed with intelligence. Britt is not stupid. She would start planning, slowly, carefully. Maybe pretending to be completely broken while secretly searching for a way to destroy him. Another thought that keeps nagging at me is the possibility that Lucas's work does not vanish with him. Maybe he leaves behind notes. Maybe he sends encrypted data to someone before he is captured. If he knew he was being watched, he might have prepared for that. That would add another layer. Britt thinking all is lost, only to discover later that Lucas managed to crack part of the formula, that his sacrifice was not entirely in vain. But even if a cure exists somewhere in fragments, the emotional damage would still be there. Britt would have to live knowing that someone died because he cared about her. That is heavy. That is not something you just move past. I also keep circling back to the dynamic between Lucas and Marco. If Marco survives but Lucas does not, the fallout will be brutal. Marco could blame Britt, even if he understands logically that she was coerced. Emotions are not logical. He might see her as the reason Lucas got involved in the first place. That could isolate her even further. No allies, no forgiveness, just distance. And that might be exactly what Cullum wants. Isolation makes control easier. A Britt who feels alone, guilty, and hated is easier to manipulate than one who feels supported. There is something almost suffocating about this whole arc. It is not flashy villainy. It is systematic domination, medication as a leash, surveillance as a cage, love as a vulnerability, and in the middle of it, Britt trying to breathe. I will say this though, if the show goes through with Lucas dying, it needs to mean something. Not just shock, not just a tragic beat. It has to shift Britt fundamentally. Either push her into becoming someone more ruthless, more strategic, or break the entire structure Cullum has built. Otherwise, it would feel empty. Because right now, the tension works precisely because Lucas represents a crack in the wall. A possibility. If that possibility is crushed in front of Britt, the aftermath cannot be small. It has to ripple. Through Marco, through Liesel, through everyone connected to this web. And maybe, just maybe, witnessing that kind of loss would finally make Britt decide that dying on her own terms is better than living under Cullum's control. That thought is dark, I know. But it feels honest. When someone has already taken so much from you, sometimes fear loses its power. I do not know how this will unfold. I only know that if Britt stands there and watches Lucas fall because he tried to give her freedom, the story will not be about weakness anymore. It will be about what comes after the breaking point. And that, for better or worse, is where things usually get explosive.